This video I'll be looking into Irlen syndrome as well as Balint syndrome. I found this great video today. It's from 2013, but it really makes it very clear. Yeah, in the morning it is a bit blurry when I wake up. I can't read text so well as later in the day. This happens with different background color, like red, as I noticed. Oh gosh, how can you read like that? Thank God for audiobooks. Star Wars! Wow. Gosh, I get dizzy by this. Probably if you have floaters, it might look like this. So, a few days ago, something happened that stressed me out because I really didn't understand this message. This was in our chat room from work. My superior wrote this message for us, and I just didn't understand the meaning. And today, finally, after so many days of being in stress, I understood what was the issue. Misreading text and getting a completely different message. Do you have trouble reading or understanding text when the background has a different color? I was not aware I had this issue. I only realized this today. See the image? The red background made it very difficult for me to see this I. I just read HR several times. My brain didn't see the I. Completely different message from one letter. So I could not figure out what this was supposed to mean. HR means human resources, and this is the administration of our company. However, ear with an I means something completely different. It means we in German. So then, of course, it makes absolute sense when this tiny little letter is added. The message makes sense. I understand it. But because of that stupid red background, my brain couldn't figure out that it meant we. So my brain read HR. So now I know that I have this issue. I shared it in our small autism group so I could learn about it more. I was really not aware I was affected by this. My eyesight is really good, and usually when I read, of course, then it's white background or black background, and I'm okay. I understand the meaning, but red background obviously is the death of me, as it looks like. I had to explain that to my boss today, what happened. So this is called Irlen syndrome. It is a perceptual processing disorder. It is not an optical problem. It is a problem with the brain's ability to process visual information. This problem tends to run in families and is not currently identified by standardized educational, psychological, optometric, or medical tests. As usual, the problem can manifest itself differently for each individual. Irlen syndrome is not remediable and is often a lifetime barrier to learning and performance. Signs of Irlen syndrome: light sensitivity, I have that. Reading problems, well, I obviously have that with red background, otherwise no. Headaches and migraines, I get that when stressed. Attention and concentration problems used to be a really bad problem, but since my body burns fat for fuel instead of glucose, somehow my brain lit up and I can do really a lot of research in one day. It's amazing and I am so glad about it. And when I was a teenager at school, it was really difficult for me to learn, to even read books or learn for a test. It just wouldn't get in. So it was difficult to learn for exams also. Strain and fatigue. I used to get that again. Since fat adapted, no more. I'm really good at reading a large part of text in one day. Print or environmental distortions? Well, sometimes when I look at stuff, my brain needs a few seconds until it registers what the picture actually is. My guess is that my brain just picks something that is familiar, and that's why sometimes I see some object and then a few seconds later I realize, oh no, this is something else, and then I really see the picture that I'm looking at. So I was aware of that, but it didn't bother me because usually I see really well. I don't have any glasses, and at age 46 this is really good. I'm happy with my eyesight. Yeah, but if you completely misread a text at work, things become a bit more complicated. So the Irlen syndrome is also sometimes referred to as asphydia or visual stress. And this makes a lot of sense to me. So in the morning when I wake up, and apparently for people who have fibromyalgia, their cortisol level is not as high as normal people. So it kind of makes sense to me that also when I wake up in the morning, I have some kind of brain fog, and then I see a bit blurry, but it's very lightly. And then my concentration is also not so good yet, meaning that when I read something, I don't get it. And then suddenly this blurriness and this slight brain fog clears up, and then this beautiful clarity of mind comes in, and then also my eyesight is very acute and all is well.
Many autistic people cannot filter the information. It is their difficulty or inability to cope with all the sensory stimulation coming in. It results in sensory overload. Those with visual problems, they experience this visual overload in places, crowded places, bright places, or fluorescent lights and all these flashing lights. And of course we have to protect them from this. And one of the methods to protect them is wearing the tinted glasses. For many autistic people I know, for example, my son, Irlen glasses helped a lot. They help to slow down all this information coming in into their brain and help them to calm down in very difficult situations.
Irlen lenses can help people with dyslexia, ADHD, ADD, autism spectrum disorders, chronic fatigue, light sensitivity issues, headaches and migraines, traumatic brain injury, anxiety and/or depression. The tinted filters are a permanent solution, eliminated discomfort, alleviated print and environment distortions, improved reading fluency and comprehension, improved writing, improved copying, eliminated depth perception problems, and raised self-esteem. Which is it? Dyslexia, language processing problems, identifying speech sounds and learning how they relate to letters and words. Phonological deficit, difficulty finding a way to represent and/or recall the basic sound units in the letters words seen on the page. Irlen syndrome, visual processing, the brain's inability to process visual information correctly, visual distortions and physical discomfort. Words may move, blur, shift, change, and distort, and individuals may experience headaches, eye strain, nausea, fatigue, or other physical symptoms. And of course, you can always improve your health with the proper diet. Being fat adapted has really lit up my brain, and therefore improved my understanding of text and learning. It's a really big difference in comparison to when I was a vegan, brain fogged, and deficient in nutrients, and the histamine intolerance as a vegan was way more pronounced. I was in chronic pain and chronic fatigue. So the author of this article was herself diagnosed with Irlen syndrome. And syndrome causes overactive brain in a response to certain wavelengths of light. That's a good way to describe it. When the brain is agitated like that, it sets off stress responses that can lead to stress-related disorders, including adrenal fatigue. Okay, this is the other way around. So the author was given prescription glasses to filter out the wavelengths, and then adrenal symptoms almost disappeared. Wow, that's very interesting. As an autistic, of course, I understand sensory overload. So when there is too much of everything, noise, bright light, too much movement, too many people, of course, then your system gets stressed. The autistic nervous system is constantly way more stressed than a neurotypical nervous system. And therefore, you will have symptoms like fatigue, exhaustion, and physical symptoms can also happen. Fibromyalgia, migraines, digestive problems, sleeping problems, and so on. And the author writes, she has been exercise intolerant for the last 4 years. So I have been exercise intolerant since the burnout in 2007. Yeah, this is exactly the pattern. You cannot do exercise without having symptoms afterwards. Instead of getting a nice energy boost from a workout, I would be even more exhausted than before, and that's typical. I have done another video on exercise intolerance about this. But now it gets interesting. The day I got my new glasses, I did a water aerobics workout. Then went to TRX suspension weight training class, whatever that is. It sounds heavy. And the next morning to jazzercise, all in a 2-day period. Oh my gosh, wow, that's amazing. As an exercise intolerant person, I can really say I could not do it. Besides feeling a little self-conscious about my dark glasses, I felt fabulous, energized. The exercise intolerance was gone. Wow. Yeah, maybe I will try those Irlen glasses when I can get them here in Switzerland. This sounds fabulous indeed. Wow. So of course the glasses can only remove the stress related to light. Other stresses will make me susceptible to crashes. Still, yes. So the condition does not go away, but the glasses can reduce the symptoms when it's related to light. High-tech hardware also requires equally super software. Imagine a computer with all its parts and pieces, many of which are too complicated for most people to understand. No matter how intricate and complicated the equipment is, without software, it can do nothing. Your computer will not even turn on without some form of software telling the hardware what to do. The same can be said of the eye. What do you see? A young lady in a glamorous coat or an old lady wrapped up warm? It is your mind that creates this world. It is caused by heightened light sensitivity in the eye and/or the brain incorrectly processing information. It is not directly caused by deficits in acuity. What are visual stress and processing difficulties? It is part of a family of specific learning difficulties with many crossover points. Chronic fatigue syndrome, dyslexia, moderate generalized learning difficulties, autistic spectrum, attention deficit hyperactivity, dyspraxia. Note, it is still disputed as to whether it forms a stand-alone condition or an aspect of other conditions. How do visual stress and visual processing difficulties present? Light sensitivity, glare from spotlights, from oncoming headlights on cars, glare from surfaces, patches on shiny surfaces, fluorescent lights, bright sunlight, ICT screens, all cause discomfort. Yes, indeed. It's painful to look at it and then you look away. I have that especially with bright sunlight or in summer when the light shines onto a place and then the reflected light burns into your eyes. Sometimes computer screens, it really depends. It's not always the same with that one. And then when you turn the light on in the middle of the night, that hurts too. Or when you wake up in the morning, the first light can hurt your eyes. How do visual stress and visual processing difficulties present? Contrast problems. Oh yeah. I don't have so much difficulty with black text on white, but as I said, black text on red, that's difficult. I find the pattern on the left side extremely disrupting, stressful to look at, and I feel dizzy and there is strain in my eyes, and I even start to sweat and feel nausea. And also the green pattern, it's too busy. Ooh, it really hurts my eyes. So this scan is also very interesting. Fatigue, difficulty staying on a task such as reading or studying. I have that when I am stressed by some other issue. Restlessness, tiredness, bouts of exhaustion, needing to take frequent breaks. So you see those two pictures are very different. Brain activity of a person without visual stress and visual processing difficulties, and brain activity of a person with visual stress and visual processing difficulties. So you have the primary symptoms: sensitivity to light, contrast problems, restricted field of vision, restricted depth perception, and fatigue. Secondary symptoms: irritability, low attention span, restlessness, limited comprehension, avoidant behavior. Theories of causation: biological, structural, a problem with hardware. It is thought individuals with visual stress and visual processing difficulties have difference in rod and cone positioning, which in turn leads to the interference of light in color processing. Psychological, a problem with software. Light, as it reaches the eye, stimulates the cones and rods that make up the retina of the back of the eye, converting it into electrical signals. This information is then processed by the magnocellular and the parvocellular pathways, wiring of the brain, before entering the visual cortex. The parvocellular pathways process still images, color, fine detail, and high contrast. The magnocellular pathways process large outlines, positions, motion, shape, and low contrast. In individuals with visual stress and visual processing difficulties, it is thought the parvocellular pathway operates more slowly, whilst the bundle of cells that make up the magnocellular pathway are smaller. This creates distortions in the images being received. Furthermore, it is also believed the magnocellular pathway is far more responsive and takes the initial processing role when a new image is presented. This is related to our peripheral vision, stemming from our evolutionary background as hunter-gatherers and potential prey for other hunters. The parvocellular pathway, related to central vision, typically kicks in when an image is honed in on, such as a text, and takes priority. In turn, the magnocellular pathway should then power down. However, it is thought that in students with visual stress and visual processing difficulties, there is a disordered delay in this process, which leads to a clash between the two pathways. This may explain why text appears to move. Research by Stevens and Robinson has indicated possible links between biochemicals such as fatty acids and visual problems typically found in students with dyslexia. There are also initial links being made with other conditions such as chronic fatigue syndrome. So for me, this is not a problem. As I said, for me it happened with red background. There is no one tint that works for everyone, because Irlen syndrome is not the same for every person who has it. One learner may find reading text printed on pastel pink easier, whereas another may need a yellow background color. Irlen syndrome may affect an individual's ability to read both printed and electronic material. When deciding which online learning program to use, look for apps that have accessibility options, including the ability to adjust text and background color. The amount and quality of light in a room may matter. For me, definitely yes. Some students prefer to avoid fluorescent or bright lighting, and may find it helpful to wear a cap with a brim. Yeah, for me, I have a very strong headlight and I almost never use that one because it really hurts my eyes. I prefer daylight. In the evening I have salt lamps, but when my computer is on this darker shade, when it changes to evening mode, sometimes I have a little bit of difficulty with that. Especially in the morning, I need really bright light coming from the computer, otherwise it's blurry. Typing may help when visual stress occurs from writing. And then of course you have the audio materials. I love audiobooks. And it's really nice when you can walk around and listen to an audiobook, go for a walk, go shopping, and it will also distract you from a stressful environment. Then you have the Balint syndrome. Balint syndrome is an uncommon and incompletely understood triad of severe neuropsychological impairments: inability to perceive the visual field as a whole, simultagnosia, difficulty in fixating the eyes, oculomotor apraxia, and inability to move the hand to a specific object by using vision, optic ataxia. It was named in 1909 for the Austro-Hungarian neurologist and psychiatrist Rezsó Balint, who first identified it. And I know Donna Williams has also talked about this issue. She had a lot of difficulties with being able to recognize what was right in front of her. So this is Donna Williams' website, and I like her approach to it. Autism is a fruit salad, a straws on the camel's back scenario. Every person with autism has a different history underpinning their own unique autism fruit salad. I see autism as straws on the camel's back syndrome and ask myself what contributed to my autism. Someone can also be autistic, then experience environmental damage, such as a brain injury, that exacerbates the presentation of their autism. And once a child is autistic, particularly if they are functionally nonverbal, they may, in the wrong environment, be far more vulnerable to being chronically abused because all the impacts and responses may most likely be deemed part of their autism or a regression this was the case for me.
Hello, my name is Donna Williams, and I'm going to do a bit of a talk about sensory perceptual disorders and the low-cost and no-cost strategies for them. I think two of the most important ones are about visual and verbal processing disorders. So, when we talk about visual processing disorders, if I can specify what some of the main ones are social emotional agnosia, the inability to read facial expression, body language and intonation. Face blindness, the inability to recognise one person from another. Sometimes even the inability to recognise one's own reflection. And so that's a world in which faces may be treated as irrelevant. The other one that I think is really important is simultagnosia, the inability to simultaneously process the visual parts as a cohesive whole. And so the person may take in the eyebrow, lose the face, take the nostril, lose the nose, get the head, lose the body, get the hand, lost the arm, get the arm, lost the torso. They may get that person but lost the room. They may get parts of the room but lost the person. They may get this person within the room but not process who is sitting next to them, or that, the things that are going on around them. So with that one, you can have anything from object blindness, in which you will see, for example, you will take in this part of the dial and lose all of this. Or you will get the numbers but lose what it's on. So you can have object blindness, in which a person will tend to tap and move and smell things. Certainly with object blindness, when the object is moving, it's easier to recognise as a whole. When it's being dropped, it's easier to recognise as a whole. So those are the three visual perceptual areas that I will want to talk about. And then there is your auditory verbal agnosia, the meaning deafness side of things. And that if that goes together in someone who's meaning blind, it is a different journey to if you have somebody who's just meaning deaf or just meaning blind. And I guess just as you have deaf people, blind people and deaf blind people, you have meaning deaf people, meaning blind people, and people who are both meaning deaf and meaning blind. The other area that people may not be aware of is what's called visual verbal agnosia, and this is people who can read but who read without meaning. So how do we get meaning back into what people are reading so that they have that chance to learn from written words. Okay, so when it comes to strategies for meaning deafness, I covered some of that in the communication one. Primarily, you need to make language much clearer, much slower, bullet points, telegraphic speech. Keep it all visual, put it all to gesture if possible. Use representational objects if you have those available. And one of the things people forget is that meaning deaf people may not be able to juggle thought inside their head. They may need to represent thought outside of their head and then be able to juggle it. And this means that if they're talking about what they did yesterday, and then you want them to contrast it with what they're doing today, they'll keep losing the last context. So if you then represent this outside of their head with two pieces of paper, a bunch of stones that say, we were over here and then we went over here and you met so-and-so and you went up on the swings together. And then what we're going to be doing today is represented by another piece of paper, a different maybe collection of sticks, and you say, and this is where you were and you went over here to this person, and then we got in the car and we drove over here. And that way the person has got two movies in a sense of having seen those scenarios played out alongside each other. They get to keep the contrast between those two realities in a way that doing it verbally they may be unable to retain, that as soon as they go to the second one, the first one's all been thrown out. And this gives people also a communication device to be able to not just comprehend what you're saying, but to tell you what's been going on for them. Think about it as mind maps. And of course you can use this, like let's say you want to talk about feelings. So that's your general concept, and then out from there you will have perhaps the really negative feelings or challenging feelings, and then the closeness sort of feelings that people maybe tend to find more acceptable. And then you can talk about these in different levels, so feeling just mildly annoyed, feeling quite agitated, feeling quite angry, having rage. Feeling okay about something, really liking something, loving something, being completely compelled about something. And using that mind map model, you can represent this, and you don't need paper. You can do it in the sand, you can do it with sticks, you can do it with stones, but using that mind map model. And if you want to create contrasts, you can put two of these mind map models alongside each other in the sand or in the dirt, and then the person can actually go and manipulate those symbols to show you how their thinking differs from what you're talking about, that sort of stuff. So I think that's a really important tool for people who can't internally mentalize and who are dealing with, say, the meaning deafness stuff. Also, understand that information overload is not just on that channel that you're trying to improve processing in. So you can actually usually improve language processing by improving visual processing. And you'll see I have coloured lenses. Now what's interesting is that although these are a very specialised tinted lens, they're made by a company called BPI, which is in America and in Britain. But this company also makes the regular brown sunglasses tint worldwide, and that tint is called Sahara. And this tint is one of only 8 autism-related therapeutic tints that work for the fragmented vision, visual perceptual disorders, in helping people glue together what they're seeing. But by reducing that information overload regarding visual processing, you also lend more processing time to language processing. And so by managing one channel, you can actually speed up processing on another. And these sunglasses, regular brown sunglasses, commonly will improve processing for some people. So when I've done testing with people with autism using these BPI lenses, around 70% of the people that I have done testing with, and we're talking about since 1996, about 70% of those people say that 3 particular lenses work for them, one of which commonly includes the regular brown sunglasses lens, which is the Sahara. So you can get hold of secondhand sunglasses, and those may actually work for some people. Another thing that you can do is, if you have a visor and you can at least take the sunlight directly out of your eyes, it's the same effect as turning off the overhead lighting. So it basically allows more time to process what's left. If you have artificial lighting and you turn it off, you'll find that this is less visually overloading, the room looks less fragmented, there's less shadow and shine, you increase visual processing time. If you can utilize things like coloured plastic or cellophane, These are things that people can use to experiment on the effect of filtering incoming light on information processing. So how I learned that tense worked for me was actually, I started with cellophane, and I found that the world looked much more glued together with certain colours than it did with others. And then I used coloured light bulbs, and I found the same thing. And then one day I came across tinted lenses. So, but I hope that that tip about the Sahara lenses is useful. I still want to talk about, if you can't afford lenses or you can't get access even to something like the Sahara tint in regular sunglasses, there are still things you can do to keep up with processing incoming information when you see your world in bits. And one of those things is that by using peripheral vision, you're actually not using as many of the rods in the front of your eyes. And for someone with Tagnosia, this actually allows them to process more fully what's in front of them. So although I appear to be looking off here at the moment, I'm actually taking in the screen and my own hands and the reflection coming back. And I process, now I'm going to look directly, but I actually process more by using peripheral vision than I do looking directly. So this is another way that we filter incoming information. So we can do it with tinted lenses that will have that effect, or we can do it using peripheral vision. We can use it by lowering the lighting so that the person has more time to process what's left. Another thing that we can do is if somebody sees a face, this bit, and they're fixating on pieces of you, you take their hand so they map the whole of you. So if they're fixating on your hair, their hand to your hair comes down to your face and onto you, and then you name yourself. So let's say they are pulling the glasses apart, hand onto the glasses, and you'd say, glasses, front of the glasses, over the ears, glasses. So you're teaching them how to map the thing as a whole with the hand. So, for example, that's clock. Let me see. So it's a clock, but it's got, it's got these cats in it and the hands and numbers on it. Someone with Tagnosia will take in the numbers and lose what this is. Or they'll take in this picture but lose that it's on a clock. Or they'll take in the hands and lose that it's, it's every piece is processed separately. And yet with my hands, I feel all the numbers together on the wooden surface, and the centre of which is the hands of the clock. And although I'm not blind, I do tend to see things in bits, especially without my glasses, and I was the kind of person who would just grab the pieces off and break things off and put them all into little categories because I didn't process the thing as a whole. And so teaching people to learn through their hands, to use their hands in place of their eyes, which are processing things in bits, that allows their hands to train their brain to perceive as a whole. Face blindness. People who are face blind will have certain kinds of behaviours. One of those is that they'll wait in a place and wait to be found rather than go and find people. And they will get used to people when they can tell what place they're going to be in, but they won't easily go and go into social spaces to find people because they've grown accustomed to being unable to recognise or always getting people confused or mixed up. So one of the things that's quite easy is if you're taking people out somewhere, you have the red hat, and then they can always find the red hat. You have maybe a scarf, a certain scarf, and it doesn't matter what clothes you change into, they can recognise you by the scarf. If they're face blind, you certainly should be teaching them to tune into songs, for example. So when you enter the room, you might sing a certain song, and they'll cheer up because they know that that's you. So even though you think you look familiar, I'm so face blind that someone can talk to me on the opposite side of the table, leave the room and come back at the side of the table, and I can't recognize them. So imagine how unnerving that is, especially when people are trying to take you somewhere new, or that sort of thing. So having that ability to sing a song and they can recognize you, make it your signature in a sense, that's useful. Having the red hat, that's useful. So the movements of a person as well. So you might have, I have a friend who says she recognizes me because I'm always bouncing on this ball when she sees me. So you can have certain types of movements. I'll meet people, oh, that's the bouncy person, oh, that's that person who moves like this, oh, that's the one who sits really in their body. So I recognize them by their movement, recognize them by the sound in their voice. But as a kid, I always tuned into clothing and various things that were changing all the time, and then get really distressed and close everybody out. So everyone was always a friend or always a stranger, because that's the face blind world. But there are ways around it. Social emotional agnosia, if you can't recognize facial expression, body language or intonation, then you're living in a completely factual world, and you have to be told what's in between the lines, because you won't hear it, you won't read it into there, especially if you see your world in bits and you're context blind, and especially if you're also a bit meaning deaf. So one of the things you can do with people with social emotional agnosia is you can formally teach them body language, facial expression and intonation. They won't learn it naturally, but they can rote learn it. And what I do is I get cartoons, and by getting the cartoons, I can use the characters in here and then draw lines of where they're looking to another character, what's the body language in this one, what it means in relation to that one, and then I'll turn the page. So I'm interpreting not just the story, but the reactions of characters that they have some control over processing, rather than just expecting people to get it in real life. But certainly you can formally teach people to learn the repertoires of facial expression, body language and intonation, even though they won't naturally pick it up without formal instruction to build up that sort of dictionary. Okay,